Good afternoon. I am Luca from Oasis Labs. I am responsible for the decentralized finance or open finance, how we like to talk at Oasis Labs. And today I'm going to give you an overview of what we think is missing in open finance to move to the next steps of the industry. But first of all, let me start from the basics, right? So what are we doing in open finance or decentralized finance? Right now, if you think of the financial system, it's pretty much well known that right now it's based on status, wealth, and geography. In other words, if you don't belong, if you don't have certain parameters like certain wealth, certain status, and you don't belong to certain geographies, it's really hard for you to access the financial system. And even if you access it, the financial system tends to be far from perfect because it's pretty much full of biases. And if you think of recent happenings or the previous financial crisis, like the component of bias was pretty big in the system. And so what open finance or decentralized finance is effectively doing right now is moving away from a system based on contracts, subjectivity, etc., and moving to an entire new space that is the composition of programmable rules, where if you have access to this rule, and if you respect these rules, then a set of conditions is met, then you get whatever the output of that computation is. Nothing more than that, right? So I think it's helpful to have this as a starting point of this industry. And you probably know these numbers already. If you look at the market, 2 years ago, in September 2017, the total amount of money that was flowing in decentralized finance or open finance was a little bit more than $1,000. And right now, we are talking about $500 million. Again, it's really small if you think of the financial system, but if you look at the growth, clearly this is a sign to believe that something can move forward. So let's have a quick snapshot at what was the first generation of open finance. So if you think of what is right now in the market, maybe even the people that are here today or the other people that have been talking before me, effectively the first generation of open finance has been focused on a lot of primitives and services and protocols and very few user-friendly application. Mainly for crypto native or people that love cryptos, it's really hard to be close to this system or to access this system if you're not a crypto expert. It's completely public, and when it comes to performance, really Ethereum is what is dominating the scene in terms of throughput and number of transactions per second, okay? So what does that mean for the real world? If we step back for a second and think of, okay, DeFi, super cool, people are making money, high interest rates, very easy to access once you understand how it works, very complicated if you don't trust it. But what does that mean to move from $500 million to some $1 trillion? So let's look at collateralized lending, like the CDP. If an institution wants to participate in that and believes in the DeFi story, today everything is going to be public and accessible, which effectively doesn't really scale and doesn't really allow for real-world usage. Imagine that you go into a bank, or like imagine that Chase publish, I mean this is a US bank, but imagine that HSBC UK publishes all the information about your mortgage to everyone. That's not exactly how it should look like, right? So why in DeFi should be the same case? Stablecoin, we hear a lot of talks and read a lot of papers around the utility of stablecoins to mimic the dollar or to mimic other currencies. But then when it comes to thinking of more traditional payment networks or payment systems, performance of Ethereum is really slower than that. So let's imagine tomorrow morning people turn into DeFi, the system is not ready for that. So to some extent we are optimizing for something that the system is not even ready to support. When you have more trading specific application like decentralized exchanges or dark pools, I mean, if the order book or the trading strategies are completely open and not confidential, how can professionals really use them? And in fact, the volume that runs on decentralized exchanges right now is pretty low. But even when you move it to another domain like compliance, again, if we step back, what happens? Before, the power is in the hands of a bunch of lawyers and contracts that keep writing a set of rules and conditions there, and they're responsible for liability. Now everything is moving towards developers. So a normal developer, 30-year-old in the Bay Area or whatever in the world, is kind of exposed to every compliance risk that may arise through, I don't know, information leakage and so on and so forth. And there is very little guarantee that this is like prevented right now, okay? So what is Oasis Labs? What are we doing? Again, outside of DeFi, we are a cloud computing platform that offers the ability of running smart contracts that keep the input of the computation completely private, if you want. I mean, depending on the application that you're running, and only the output of the computation is revealed. So let's see how this is. Let's see what are the building blocks, and then let's see how this can possibly make a difference in DeFi. And let's use this session also to like think if this makes sense, because like, I mean, we are somehow designing the future. No one has done it before, so it's completely fair to say, if you have inputs, let us know, because it's an interesting conversation. Okay, the building, our network, we are a layer 1 blockchain, which means that we are gonna have our own token, the smart contracts are gonna run on our platform. But we have 2 building blocks. First one is everything that you already know about a blockchain, fully decentralized, permissionless, and so on. The second important part here is secure computation. We have this we use a combination of different cryptographic techniques to run computation in a very private way, in a very secure way. In other words, the computation runs inside an enclave and is bounded by the limit of this enclave. So nothing leaves that enclave. And I'll give some example later. So one thing that we are announcing these days is this open finance development platform. What are we trying to enable here is we want to allow developers to write decentralized applications and that keep the data confidential while still enabling for computation at scale. That's very important. And the open finance component here is because we are trying to make it extremely easy for developers to integrate primitive protocols and other services. So if you have been attending this conference, you probably had a sense of how many protocols are coming to the market, solving specific pieces of the financial system. Here's the question is, how do we bring everything together, and how do we make it extremely easy for developers to build whatever they want to in a way that they can focus on the application itself and not on studying like documentations, tutorials, and so on forever. This open finance development platform is going to be based on 4 core features. Some of them are closer to our core business. Some of them we are researching into. But we have privacy, scalability, composability, and identity and reputation. Let's start from privacy. We use privacy and confidentiality in a sort of similar way right now. One thing that we want to say, and that we generally take care of, is that when we say privacy, we don't want to hide the information to like governments or whatever. So it's not a sketchy thing that says, okay, whatever you do, no one has access to. But it's mostly who has to have access to that is going to be allowed to see whatever is needed, whatever is designed to be open, or whatever is designed to be allowed to certain entities. But for the most part, you want to keep your application confidential, okay? So the way it works is, it's pretty simple to put it on slides, very complicated in reality, but the closest example we could make is this idea of a black box. So an application and the data live in different places, but when they are queried, when they run together in this black box. So the computation and the data run inside this black box, and only the output of this computation is released. That black box is not Oasis Labs, but it's a decentralized platform that we don't have access to. Okay? So one very basic example here, just to make it understandable, is if I want to get the average age of people in this room, right now I have essentially 2 solutions. Either I go one by one, ask your age, and then compute it, put it on a slide, but I become the information owner, or I hire a third party that does the same job, and I need to trust a third party. So if I put a box here, and each of you put the age inside, and then the black box repeats, like just runs the computation and spits the output, that's more or less what it is. It's much more complicated than that, because I haven't included any node in this example, but this is what effectively is, okay? So when we think of how does privacy apply, privacy and confidentiality, how do they apply to the open finance world? Again, if you think of participation of a company or an individual in whatever, in the system, in a collateralized debt position, in a mortgage, whatever you can think of, that can be kept confidential to the public and only released to whoever is allowed to, like credit scoring or some other entities that need to have access to that. When it comes to more financial, like trading application, trading and order book can be hidden, and again, without sacrificing the computation. That's the important piece of that. And manipulation, and the most common example is probably from running, can be prevented. How does that work? You probably heard something around like zk-snark or Zcash, etc. The biggest difference here is that when it comes to these other cryptographic protocols, generally, you cannot combine inputs from multiple sources, run the computation, and release the output. But when you think of zk-snark, for instance, it's really helpful when you move money from one person to another one, from one wallet to another one, but it's not really helpful at all when you have to combine my data, your data, or like my data from different sources and run my credit score, for instance, which is another way to say, in the CDP, when you have to compound, when you have to calculate or compound the interest rate based on supply and demand, you cannot merge all these different sources and get only one output. Moving to scalability, I'm sure you heard that before. That shouldn't sound new at all. So Ethereum today can only support 15 transactions per second. Okay, there are projects to scale it. I mean, we're all sure they're going to make it. But at the same time, Visa supports something around 1,700 transactions per second. But the way we see it as Oasis Labs is very far from here. And we say, okay, transaction per second is only one part of scalability. The other part is complexity of the transaction, which means that it's completely different to run one transaction where I need to run something that goes from me to someone else. So this is one case. And the second case is I need to run a machine learning model to assess my financial health across my past 15 years of financial history, combine that with my spouse's story, and then assess my credit worthiness in a private way. Okay? And so we think that effectively scalability should be way more than just TPS. So our encouragement is when you read some other chains that optimize for one or the other, like make sure that it makes sense from the use case that they're trying to solve. And this is the encouragement that we give to the companies that are trying to build on top of us. So in this case, that is particularly applicable for open finance. You can see a world where you have your tokens in your wallet or in multiple wallets. You store these tokens somewhere. You run and consume your services, maybe mediated by an insurance. And then all this data, through this flow, actually serves some machine learning model that returns whatever type of score, which may be, again, for your credit score or for some application-specific purpose, and then everything is returned back to your token. How do you do that if the network doesn't support complex transactions? Okay? How do we do that? This is the interesting part. When you think of the classic knowledge of blockchain, you generally have compute, storage, and consensus, and all of them are executed by each node of every single blockchain, which makes the computation really, really intense and effectively takes forever, and that's why the 15 transactions per second. We came to the market later, so we could improve on someone else's project, and the biggest idea that we're bringing to the market is separating the 3 layers, consensus, storage, and computation, and each layer can be scaled separately depending on what the application needs, which means that we have different nodes that perform different applications, which are these 3. We can scale them independently. We can embed privacy in each of them, and this creates a much better performance than some other networks. So let's move into composability. I'm pretty sure that you saw at least some of these companies, the top three, Pool, InstaDApp, and Flux. What is happening in the market right now, as I said before, is that people are composing applications that try to be user-friendly or as user-friendly as possible. In other words, people are doing user acquisition through user interface, right? Making it extremely helpful and easy for users to use. In InstaDApp, you can manage your CDP across multiple platforms all in one place. And so they offer users a much better experience than what you can find on Compound or on alternative protocols. But under these applications, they are combining multiple protocols together. And there's a very similar analogy to the internet before, to how internet was scaled. And this is where internet failed, like composing protocols, because companies, like big companies, realized that there were inefficiencies and sort of took advantage of that. You can read multiple blog posts that are very interesting and enlightening. So what we're trying to do, we don't have like the perfect solution right now to make different protocols work together, but we're making it super easy to integrate this protocol on our network. And so for developers, that's not going to be a pain anymore to like go, let me see if I have, to go discover what are the best the existing protocols in the market, then read the documentations, which takes forever, and then evaluate what is best for them, and then realize how these protocols work together. And so you can envision a world where you open, like you submit your dollar to an account, automatically gets converted to crypto. You can lend it somewhere, you can borrow it somewhere else, you can move this position based on the interest, and then you can reverse this flow. Like you can totally imagine a world where like an equivalent of Wealthfront or these like money managers that are completely automated, run on crypto, and the user doesn't even know that this is happening, okay? So this is what an architecture will look like. And again, you can embed privacy and confidentiality at every layer while scaling your application to millions of users. So at the bottom of that, we have the Oasis network, which is what I've been describing at the very beginning. We are building a series of confidential primitives that support ERC20 tokens, or in other words, Ethereum-based tokens. Lending, two-way pegging, which is this ability of leveraging the existing liquidity on Ethereum to run on our network so that we don't ask users to make more complicated exchanges or to swap tokens, which is not exactly what they want. Buy, sell orders, lending contracts, etc. One layer above that is going to be all the protocols and services that you can think of in a DeFi application, from decentralized exchanges, the ability of calling oracles, to lending, etc. So in other words, we have the confidential version that is built by us, but you have the existing version as well that is going to be built by other people, leveraging the existing usage and liquidity. So we add features to the existing applications. We're not asking developers to start from scratch. And then on top of that is going to be your application that deals with the final user. This is the vision that we have, and this is what we are about to release. From a development standpoint, so if there's any developer in the room, the idea here is to make it super easy. I'm going to be quick here, but you log into a dashboard where you create your own application. You're going to start adding the categories that you need to add. So for instance, you need an Oracle for your DeFi application. So what do? You click on the Oracle tab, and you're going to find all the integrations there that are already pre-made. It's only going to be a matter of clicking plus, and your contract is deployed on the network. And then you only need to take care of the application logic, which means like if-then, a series of rules, and your application works. You don't have to go through hours of development. You don't have to go through the tutorial or the documentation of the existing protocol and services, and we expect this to work. Pretty easy. On top of that, still for developers, I'll spend 1 second talking about how we see the whole process of building and developing an application. So effectively, developers will be focused on 3 aspects: build, deploy, and manage. We build our own SDK, and we are supporting Rust, which will support also confidentiality, which is our main feature. For what concerns deploying, it will be easy to port your application on the Oasis network. from Ethereum, so you don't have to rewrite your queries. We are backwards compatible with Ethereum and support the WASM runtime. And for managing, we have the dashboard that we saw before, where you can manage your protocols and make them work. But we also offer analytics, which means that your application can monitor anytime what contracts are called, what people are doing, and what are the smart contracts that are interacting with you, where you're spending your money in fees, and so on and so forth. So a full set of analytics is going to be present on our dashboard. The last piece that I want to talk about is the identity and reputation. In the previous talk, they were talking about identity mainly as KYC, which is, okay, who's the user? How I make sure that the person is, who's the person is like saying. So if you think of the world today in DeFi, we are in a world where you can only have over-collateralized lending, which is I put $150 equivalent of Ethereum, I retrieve $100 of DAI, I go somewhere, do my trading things, get my profit, and then I cash out, and then I leverage the growth of Ethereum plus my return on investment on the DAI. But this is not really, this is good for the current model, but it's very specific to crypto enthusiasts and to people that know how to do all these steps. But the real step is going to be, I mean, the next step of that is actually like the multi-collateralized lending, which means that you can collateralize multiple things, not just Ethereum. But we're still in the space of over-collateralization. And if you think of the real use cases outside of shorting and margin, what happens is that it's pretty uncommon to put more money on the table than the one you receive. Like, otherwise, what do you want money if you already have them? So the KYC is entering the market right now for some regulation aspect, but it's only one aspect of identity. And this is the message that we want to pass here, and that's what we're researching into. The second question is, how do we create a reputation system that will enable under-collateralization, which means in the current system, even if you only refer to CDP, you can have two wallets. On one wallet, you put all your good actions and good activities. On the other wallet, you put all your bad activities and the loans that you don't repay. And if you only log in with the first wallet, the provider will never know that you have a bad history. And so how do you ensure completeness on top of attestation of who you are? And this is what we are researching into. It's extremely complicated. We don't really know what's going to happen and how to do it right now, because it implies that every time you log in on whatever platform, the same wallet should be generated. That's sort of the idea. And there are a lot of challenges there because it's a global industry. And so this is getting complicated, and we're trying to understand what to do and partnering with other people. But this is the missing step that will effectively enable under-collateralization based on your reputation. And this is what we are researching into right now. So the idea is, if you think of your identity online and offline, it's effectively a piece of a mosaic. So there's many pieces that compose your identity, from your financial history to your activity in the sharing economy, to the attestation of your document and so on, and so, of your physical identity and so on and so forth. You want to buy a new car, for instance. So what do? You go to a store. You need a loan, right, for your car. You go to a store, you provide your information, they give you some money, you go buy the car, and then you pay in installments. How does that look in the blockchain? That means combining data from multiple sources, run some computation in a private way, and then get some level of score, which in this case is 92% as an example. And that information is used to establish your reliability or your ability to pay back your loan. So you see how the network that I've been describing before, with the idea of enabling reputation, will be empowering people to own their own information, make them queryable and searchable in a private and confidential way from people that need to access that, from loan issuer, for instance, and through a score that belongs to you and is the same across every application. So you move entirely the picture from relying on a credit score provider, which is the current situation, which only captures some of the data, is geographically bounded, and so on. You move from this situation to a situation where the information stays with you, and you give access to someone else only for computation purposes, and only one score is released at the end. So this is what we're researching into, and that's why privacy and scalability become extremely important. So let's recap and let's bring everything together in a probably oversimplified way at this stage. But in the current stage of open finance, we see that you can add privacy to bring open finance to the real world. Again, the analogy is if you go to a bank, your loan history is not released to a public information, to a public ledger right now. So why should it be in open finance? What are the advantages of that? Scalability will bring it to real-world usage. And again, the analogy is the 15 transactions per second versus the 1,700 transactions per second, and the complexity of the transaction. So combining multiple sources in one computation. Composability, with the idea that if we make it easy for developers, developers will be able to focus more on the users and less on the technology, which is what happened in other industries or other areas of the internet. And last is identity and reputation, which will enable under-collateralization, which will probably be the big step to bring open finance to fintech players and to traditional banks. We just released a blog post yesterday. You're encouraged to have a look at that. It says exactly the same things that I've been talking about today. I made this link, which is pretty easy to remember. So if you want, just have a look, and if you want to clap it. And we have one ask for you. So we are trying to find as many partners as possible to work together and to really advance the state of open finance. It's a big space, so there's really space for everyone, and the idea is working together. There are three things that we really care about. People that want to build DApps on top of our network, come talk to us, come talk to me. I left an info email, the next slide as my email. If you are one of these protocols, primitive or services, we want to integrate your service in our dashboard. So just talk to us, send us an email, or just connect us to your friends, and we'll mutually evaluate what we'll be doing together. And if you have more broader feedback, or if you think this doesn't make sense at all and we're going the wrong direction, please let us know, because that's helpful as well. And that's it.